Hi everybody, it's Chari here today, and I'm going to be making this Thanksgiving card. So I'm going to be using the little thankful mice as well as some image from the Happy Harvest set. And you can see up there I've also got Happy Feast, but I didn't actually use the pieces from Happy Feast on the card I'm showing you today. I'm going to be using the Distress watercolor cardstock to make some of my background pieces. So I'm going to take one of these stitched rectangles here and cut out a piece of that cardstock, and you'll see I'm snugging it up to the bottom so that I've got the top left over, because I'm also going to cut just the bottom half of one of those rectangles, and that's going to be the ground for my little scene here. So now I just have a bottom half of the rectangle, and I will cut the top with scissors to create the little hill. And then that extra piece left over, you can keep that if you think you might need it. I actually used it at one point to kind of do like a test run on some stamping. So I'm going to get out my craft mat here because I'm going to do some distress ink blending on these pieces. I like to do the distress ink blending first so that it can have a little time to absorb and dry while I work on the other parts of my card. What I'm actually making today are my invitations for Thanksgiving, or a version of them anyways. So I'm getting out some distress inks here. I've got tumbled glass, I've got broken china, and I've got some shaded lilac. So I'm going to start at the bottom and work my way up, starting with the shaded lilac, and I'm going to put it pretty far up at the bottom because most of that bottom part is going to be covered up with the other piece that's the ground. Now I'm going to go in with the tumbled glass, and I'm going to cover the whole top and blend the two colors together. I'm going to go in with a little more of the shaded lilac and blend them a little more. You can just keep going back and forth with your colors until you get it looking the way you want. Now I'm going to go in with the broken china and just do a little bit right at the top there. So now I've got the colors for my ground, and I'm going to start with scattered straw, and you can see that I forgot to cut my piece of cardstock, so you'll see me do that here in just a minute. So I'm going to get out a pencil and I'm going to draw a line on the back, just freehand it because it does not have to be perfect. It's pretty easy to get a good curve. I pulled it over to the side, so I was putting it beside my sample actually so that I could see if it was in the right place. I needed to make it a little shorter. So now I've got my curve cut, my little hill. So I'm going to go back in with the scattered straw. And then this is fossilized amber. I'm going to use that kind of right along the top. And the color changes are very subtle when you do this, but it is a little nicer, gives it a little more depth than just pattern paper or solid paper. Now I'm going to go in with wild honey along the bottom and just define the edge. It makes it pop just a little bit more. A little more fossilized amber on the top. Alright. So I've set those aside, so now I'm going to work on the pieces of my card. I have the two little mice mounted on a block here, far enough apart to where when I use the dies to cut them out, I won't have any problem with the dies getting in the way of each other. And I'm going to be making like 6 of these, so I'm going to stamp out a bunch of mice. I'm only going to make one in this video, but these are what I plan to send to my family for Thanksgiving to invite them to come to Thanksgiving in our new house. So I'm stamping them out with Memento Tuxedo Black ink because I'm going to do some Copic coloring. And I'm just stamping out multiples of all of them. So typically I would sit down and color all these at once, but I'm just going to do this one card for you and I'll work on my other mice later. But I'm going to do simple coloring on these guys. So I'm starting with an N3 gray. And then I'm going to go in with an N4, just slightly darker, and just put a little shading under his hat and right under his paws. Then I'll go back in with the N3 and blend it out. And then I'm going to do the same thing on the other one. Very simple shading, they're very small, so we don't want to make it too complicated. I'm going to color the inside of their ears with the R20. And then I'm going to color the little girl mouse's hat with some blue colors. And I first grabbed a B23 thinking that was the color I wanted, and then I decided that was a little too dark for what I wanted. So what I actually did was I just made that the front part of her hat, and then I went in with the B21, which is a little lighter, and did the back part. So she kind of has a two-tone hat, and I actually really like how that turned out rather than coloring it all the same. Now I'm using an E23 for the other hat. And I'm going in with a very dark gray, almost black, a T9 for the buckle of the hat. And then I'm going to use a Y19 for the band. And I went back with the brown and did a little more shading just so it wasn't all the same color. Very simple coloring on these mice. Now it's time to do the pumpkin. So I started with a Y38. And then I'm going to go in with a YR15 and just do a little darker shading right at the bottom. Very simple. And then I'll finish off the top with the YG25. And now I'm going to use the coordinating dies that go with this set. Just going to bend them back and forth and break them apart from each other to cut out my little mice and the pumpkin as well. So I've run this through my die cut machine. And I love how it cuts them out perfectly. You don't even lose their little tail, because I would not cut out their tail if I was fussy cutting. And I have started putting my dies in this little dish that I got at IKEA. It's a star. I think it was a holiday thing, but I tend to lose stuff and all the stuff on my desk. So this is working really well for me if I could just remember to put my dies in there. So now I'm going to do a little stamping on the background. So I'm just going to lay my pieces out so I can see kind of where everything falls in the composition. And then I'm going to do some stamping of that cornstalk. So this is a solid stamp, and since I'm stamping on something that's already been inked, I don't want it to absorb in there too much, so I'm going to be using this chalk ink. And I'm sort of marking where the edge of my hills are, or my hill, only one. It's very light, you can't see it hardly at all. Actually, after I started looking for it, I couldn't find my pencil mark, but that's just to show me kind of how far down I need to stamp these. Now I stamped them once by hand. The second one I made, I actually used my Misty tool so I could stamp it twice and have it lined up exactly. The chalk ink looks much better when you stamp it twice. I'm not sure why, but the card in the photograph that I took is the one that's stamped twice, and you can see that the cornstalks are much richer in color if you can stamp the stamp on top of itself a second time. Now I've used one of the scallop rectangles and I've cut it out here in craft cardstock, but I decided that the brown wasn't as dark as I wanted it to be, so I'm just going in with brushed corduroy and inking the edges of this piece of cardstock here. Don't have to ink the middle, it's going to get covered up by the other pieces, so just the edges. And now I've cut a strip of craft cardstock. I think it is 3/4 inch wide. You can stamp it first and then cut it if you want. I just cut it first. And I'm using some walnut ink, and I'm going to use the Give Thanks sentiment that's with the Thankful Mice. And I'm going to stamp it on here, lining it up. You can't, like I said, you can stamp it and then cut it, but I actually measured to see what width would work with this sentiment. I'm going to set that aside, and I'm going to start assembling my card. So I've got a cream colored cardstock card base here that I've made, and I'm just going to put the scalloped rectangle directly onto the card base. And then I'm using a piece of fun foam. This is a Jennifer McGuire trick that I've just started doing, and it's a lot cheaper than all the foam tape I was using, and it works a lot better. So I've just put it on the back of this using that adhesive runner, and then I added some adhesive to the back of that, and I'm gonna stick that down. And this will support the whole panel with foam the whole way. And I'm getting rid of my craft mat here because I like using the grid to make sure things are straight, and I can't see my grid through it. So I'm going to put down the ground here, just lining it up with the bottom edge of that panel that I inked with the blue and the purple. And then I'm going to use this liquid glue here, and I'm using my tweezers because these pieces are small. And I'm going to just put down the little mice and the pumpkin. Now I'm going to just use my scissors and cut little fishtail banner ends on this sentiment piece that I stamped earlier. I just cut it to where it overlaps the sides of my little panel, but it doesn't go past the edges of my card. And I'm going to use a little liquid glue to put that down so that I can move it around and get it straight. And then I felt like it needed just one more little thing. And I was going to stamp a heart above the mice, and I decided that there wasn't a good color that I had to stamp the heart. So I have this little thing I keep of all these little pieces that I cut out sometimes, and I don't use them all. And I've got some white hearts. This little heart I cut with the hearts that come with the 3x4 stitch journaling card. But I pulled out a white one. I couldn't find a pink one that was a pink that I liked. So I'm going to use the white one and just color it with the Copic marker and get a more peachy pink that I like. And I'll just use a little dab of glue to put that down. Tweezers come in very handy for tiny little pieces like this. And then finally, it's never finished without a little bit of glitter, right? So I'm just going to put a little dab of clear Wink of Stella glitter on the heart. And then I actually have a black Wink of Stella glitter that I'm going to use on the buckle on his hat. I felt like that kind of needed to be shiny. And there is the finished card. I think it's going to make a great invitation to send to my family for Thanksgiving. And here's a close-up of the card. Thanks for watching. Have an amazing day. Bye.